Welcome everybody. This is how to spot and respond to deception, manipulation, and misinformation. And it's the first event in a series that we're running all about Puget Sound Energy, or PSE. My name is Ingrid Archibald, and I use she and they pronouns. I'm a field organizer with Stand.Earth, and I occupy land of the Duwamish people. And I want to acknowledge that all of us are on land that belonged to others before we were here. I myself am based in so-called Seattle, Washington, and the Duwamish people, past and present, have stewarded this land since time immemorial. And I just want to say that I am so grateful for the land itself and for the Duwamish tribe. If you also occupy Duwamish land, I would recommend paying real rent Duwamish if you're able to acknowledge where we live and where we occupy. I want to welcome everybody here tonight. Like I said, this is the first event in our series. So taking our power back, Puget Sound Energy, fossil fuels, and creating a clean and healthy energy future. So these are all of the events that we have to look forward to. These events will take place over the next few Thursdays, all at 6 p.m. And I encourage you all to register for the rest of the series if you haven't already. I just want to highlight that next week's event is about financial flaws. So that will be February 4th at 6 p.m. And you can go ahead and register for the rest if you haven't already. I also want to thank all of our co-hosts. We have so many different organizations and grassroots groups who have been part of this effort. And I especially want to highlight and thank 350 Seattle and Stacy for organizing this series and really championing this and making it possible. And all of these groups for all the work that they've put in. It's really exciting to see everybody coming together to work on this. Just so everybody knows, we're recording this event and we will be sending out an email with this recording and with all of the resources that we talk about. So you can expect to get an email from us within the next few days. And tonight we have two wonderful speakers joining us who I just want to introduce right now. So Claudia Riedner is the co-founder of Redefine Tacoma, who successfully fought off a methanol plant in Tacoma. And they're currently working to fight off the Tacoma LNG plant. She's going to help us break down specifically how PSE interferes with communities based on her firsthand experience in Tacoma and how they manipulate the public as well through advertisement. And then we have Doug Howell, who works at Sierra Club as the senior campaign representative. He works on coal, gas, clean energy, and utility equity. And he's going to talk through how PSE intervenes with our politics and governmental processes, primarily through manipulating data. So we have wonderful speakers tonight. We're going to talk all about Puget Sound Energy and the ways that they interfere and manipulate the public. And then we'll have breakout rooms where we'll actually put those skills to practice and talk about how they're doing this. And then we'll have time at the end for questions. So as we're going, please feel free to pop any questions into the chat and we'll try to take as many as we can at the end. And our goal tonight is to wrap up by 7:15 p.m. But of course, if you have to leave at any point, please feel free to jump off whenever you need to. Like I said, there will be a recording coming your way in the next few days. All right, I think that's an intro and we can get into it. Okay. So just to start us off, I thought it would be helpful for us to just be grounded in the fact that fossil fuel companies have been part of a coordinated effort to deceive the public. I'm sure that for many of us, that is not new information, but I just wanted to play a little clip about a movie called Merchants of Doubt, which specifically highlights how the fossil fuel industry has borrowed the strategy of big tobacco. So we're just going to watch this clip and then we'll get into it.
Catastrophic global warming is a hoax.
There's no scientific consensus.
You go up against a scientist, most of them are very hard to understand and very
Robert Kenner's documentary Merchants of Doubt says the pundits against global warming have adopted a strategy of doubt that tobacco companies started in years past.
I believe nicotine is not addictive.
Kenner says that the same group of people the tobacco industry used to spread a doubt about tobacco's harmful effects is now working on climate change. He calls conservative commentators like Mark Morano of ClimateDepot.com silver-tongued, pundits.
Communication is about sales. Keep it simple. People will fill in the blank with their own, I hate to say biases, but with their own perspective in many cases.
Kenner says nowadays these so-called science experts are paid by big oil money to create confusion.
Like tobacco, these guys have been able to say, we need more studies, we need more time. They've deferred it, or you're taking our freedom away, or we're going to lose jobs.
All right, so that's a little bit of a general background about the fossil fuel industry. But now let's pivot to Puget Sound Energy, which is who we're specifically talking about tonight and throughout this series. So for example, PSC has a program called Powerful Partnerships, where they work with local organizations to come up with plans for community engagement, supply materials and speakers that extol the virtues of natural gas, and offer a financial contribution to compensate for their time. A cynic would call that bribing organizations to distribute propaganda. And then they also, I wanted to really highlight that they're part of a group called Partnership for Energy Progress, which is a coalition representing the interests of the gas industry. Specifically, they target folks across Oregon and Washington state. And they launched just this last year in 2020, where they invested over $2 million to distribute ads that hype up this idea that natural gas is good for us and that we need it for cooking and for heating our homes and buildings. And we know that this campaign is, first of all, full of lies and misinformation. And second of all, is a direct response to the growing movement for building electrification and for us moving our buildings and all of our infrastructure off of fracked gas. So here in this slide, there's a picture that I took actually here in King County of a bus ad that PEP ran, and it says, reliable, affordable natural gas here for you. So they ran these ads, and then actually, we'll put a link in the chat here. The Metro actually recalled the ads and said that they shouldn't run ads about natural gas because first of all, they were full of lies, and it is contrary to the climate work that's being done at the county level. So that's a really great example of a win and a way that we actually can combat propaganda and misinformation that seeps into the public from these really rich interests. So you can see this is a picture of some of the partners who are part of the Partnership for Energy Progress. And so you can see there's Cascade Natural Gas, Northwest Natural Gas, Puget Sound Energy, and then I wanted to highlight a couple of others. So Enbridge, which is the biggest financer of the Line 3 pipeline, which is, I'm sure many of you are following this story, but a pipeline that's being proposed through native land. And then Williams, which is responsible for a LNG tank that exploded in Plymouth, Washington, which we'll actually show a picture of in a couple of slides. But when you see a name like Partnership for Energy Progress, you really have to ask yourself, why would they call themselves Energy Progress, and what does that evoke? And why would they be cloaking themselves in this green language, which we call greenwashing, right? When an interest that isn't actually environmental uses language that appeals to folks' environmentalism or their desire to protect natural resources. And with that, I'll pass it off to Claudia.
Hey everybody, hi, my name is Claudia Wiedner. She, her, I am on Puyallup ancestral land, and we have formed a group that's called Redefine Tacoma. We advocate for a fossil fuel free future here in our city and around the nation, and we are standing with the Puyallup tribe. So deception is easily being passed by people if you don't think a little deeper. And so if it sounds fishy or if it sounds too good to be true, it's good to take a second look and good to find out where is it coming from, who is propagating it, who is paying for it, and of course who would benefit from it. Next one. We're having a little delay with the slides for technical reasons. Thank you for your patience. So Puget Sound Energy likes to claim that they have operated an LNG for years without any incidents. It turns out that that LNG is just a tiny little 10,000 gallon tank, and they don't make the LNG, and they don't regasify it. They don't really, it's a very small tank, just a tank. So while they're claiming that, there's only one other facility in the entire state of Washington that does LNG, and that's out in Plymouth. And that facility just in 2014 had a major explosion. It had ended up costing over $74 million, and it sent several people to the hospital. And it also caused a 2-mile exclusion zone, meaning that everybody had to evacuate within that zone. So when you see the ads and they say it's safe, we have proof it's actually quite dangerous, especially for in a city. So what we've been seeing over the last few years is that they're not just touting that they're clean and that they're safe, but now they're actually engaging young people, and they're paying influencers as young as 14 and 15-year-old who perhaps have a cooking show to they give them money to promote gas for cooking. And as we know from many scientific reports, gas is actually very unhealthy for cooking, especially because your face is over the stove, is over the burning. And also indoor air pollution from gas stoves is manifold more when you're cooking than it would be allowed for outdoor air. Here's a fun one we found, and it was pretty ironic that PSC is claiming, you know, to be great, to be reliable, to be clean, and a clean and safe fuel, and then they kind of play a joke on a flat Earth, and when we really know that gas might be good for a flat Earth, but definitely not for a round planet. So PSC for the last few years has been blasting our city and our region with wall-to-wall advertisement on all platforms. We find it in the paper, we find it online, we find it on videos, on YouTube. We unfortunately also find it on our local public radio station and the Seattle public radio station as well. And so they're spending over $90,000 every month, or they have for many years, to greenwash our community for this liquefied natural facility they want to build. And so at one point, they actually held a meeting at our convention center, and they had these 3 really fantastical ideas to demonstrate to the people that LNG is really safe. And one of them was that they declared that fish actually don't mind swimming in LNG. Now, mind you, LNG is held at minus 260 degrees Fahrenheit. So you don't even want to imagine what would happen to any living being finding itself in this kind of environment. That would be an instant death, right? So the second point they made is that LNG is very, very safe, and you can actually put your cigarette out in LNG. So they had a guy from a group that PSC hired light up in our convention center and put the cigarette in a glass that we were supposed to believe was LNG, when in all reality, it was just a glass of water, and they poured a little bit LNG on it, but the gas, of course, evaporates, and then it's safe to put your cigarette out in the water. And then the third point they tried to make is that it's actually even safe for drinking, and it doesn't pollute the water. So again, they poured a little bit of LNG on top of the water, waited for the gas to evaporate, and then they drank the water and said, hey, you know, it's safe for everybody. And so another thing they've been doing more recently is that they were literally pushing gas for children. They had coloring contests online, and they have this new character called Don Fuego, clearly meant to entice children to love gas. And you know, children, their lungs are not developed yet, and they have to breathe a lot more air in compared to adults. And so they're actually exposed to a lot more toxins and a lot more pollution in their little bodies. So I find it particularly despicable to target the little ones for gas. Thank you.
Oh, you know who I am?
I have the advantage.
You guys doing your research. We've done our research on you guys too. When did you guys give public notice for the pipes going in right here? There wasn't public notice given.
Truly,
and it happened pretty fast.
Truly, we get all of the permits we need.
I know, but there wasn't public notice given.
That the jurisdictions tell us to get.
The pipeline was being laid using a right-of-way permit, which is basically a sewer line permit. Such permits are not subject to appropriate safety or environmental review.
Oh yeah, let's talk about your guys' insurance, how your guys' insurance only covers $50 million. Let's talk about how it doesn't cover acts of God or terrorist acts or anything else. It just covers $50 million and not only be the start of an LNG spill. I do.
But do you let anyone
because
talk back?
this is happening on my land.
It is.
This is my people's land.
It's historically been your land.
Yeah, it's our land. And you're raping our mother for a profit.
That's on the reservation.
I don't believe it is on the reservation. I mean, I think that the reservation, I think the tribe believes it is.
The entire route of the pipeline extension is within the boundaries of the Puyallup Reservation. Not historically, but actually.
The idea is we build this, and then what we do is we go down to the Utilities and Transportation Commission in Olympia and say, we've built this, we've paid this expenditure, this is all of the details of all of the money we spent. Can we put this into our rate base? Puget Sound Energy, obviously, you know, is a utility company, and we are mandated to provide electric utilities to everyone. Gas is not a mandate, but we have over 800,000 customers that expect gas.
PSE customers will pay almost half of the cost of building the facility. The privately owned utility justify this as the plant will provide some gas back to them. But over its life cycle, those customers will only use 2% of the gas it produces.
But this pipeline and plant isn't for the customers?
This particular one happens to not be. The LNG plant is twofold.
This is for profit.
It is a peak shaving facility, and it is to provide cleaner fuel to tote.
Tote is the only customer PSE currently have for the facility. But concerned at the permitting issues surrounding the LNG plant, they have delayed converting ships to run on the fuel. But hey, at least she knew Steve.
So I'm going to say...
Steve's interesting, yeah. Are you talking to Steve Storms?
I am Steve.
Yeah.
I am Steve.
Okay, yeah. Steve!
Yeah.
I get to meet you!
Yeah.
I'm Alberta! What's nice to meet you!
Wow.
All right, that was a clip from the documentary called Ancestral Waters, which was produced by and is available through the Native Daily Network. And if you haven't watched the whole documentary, I would highly, highly recommend it. And that was just one clip that we wanted to highlight tonight to really show how PSC can do some really personal and very creepy investigating and go into communities, and in this case specifically to the Puyallup tribe, and interfere. And now I'll pass it off.
Hi, am I up?
Yes.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me here tonight. As Ingrid said, my name is Doug Howell. I work for Sierra Club. I use he, him pronouns. I'm here in Seattle, land of the Duwamish, and my wife and I, we do pay rent. It's a great way to try to bring things back into balance. I was looking at the participants list. It was so nice to see so many names that I knew. And so many experts are here on whether it's Puget or gas. Jim Lazar, Don Marsh, Kevin Jones, Cynthia Mitchell, Tad Anderson. There's so many of you. You could be doing this presentation too. I'm honored to be here to try to represent the work that we do together. And you know, I was asked to try to point out some of PSC's deceptions, manipulations, and misinformation. That's a pretty easy lift. I'll throw PSC a bone. They do some good things sometimes, and when they do, we're going to try to work with them. but we also have to be vigilant about this deception, manipulation, and misinformation. So with that, please, next slide. Just quick overview on gas, just as a starting point. It's often being portrayed as cleaner than coal, and that's really because they're just looking at smokestack, and as we'll get into later, that's definitely not the case. And methane, the value of what it is compared to carbon dioxide, is significantly worse, up to 86 times more damaging than carbon dioxide. We'll get into that too. And when we know about fracking, all the damage, the poisoning of groundwater, it certainly isn't natural what we're doing with it, and it sure as hell isn't clean. And then the other thing that we're learning about how Puget in particular deals with methane leakage, that's the gas that leaks from wellhead to end use, is really being grossly underreported. We'll get into that. So just want to make sure we have a baseline. And so next slide. I thought we'd start with money. And this is a kind of a generalization, but so much of it is true. Next slide. PSE can earn up to 10% for doing new capital. They got 9.8% traditionally, recently 9.4%, but we're captive customers. It's a monopoly. It's a very generally low risk, but extraordinary profits. And so if they can do big capital things like gas plants, they will. And just to contrast that with energy efficiency, where they don't make profits. And so you already see a tendency that is undermining clean energy and moving towards dirty energy. Next slide, or next bullet. And so the other thing you need to know here is that a lot of where their demand for new gas plants comes from is that how they project an increase in demand for electricity. So next slide, please. So given this as kind of background, two things I think you need to know. Next bullet. Really, for the past 10 years, PSE has not been maximizing their work on energy efficiency. And I'll bet you Jim Lazar could tell you it's probably been for 20 or 30 years. They come in and they leave a bunch of efficiency behind. They'll swap out light bulbs, but then there's so much more they could do that is still cost effective under the law, and it's being left behind. And when you do that, it makes it harder to come back to that building and do deeper efficiencies. The other thing that we clearly know is that the rate at which they're implementing their efficiency plans could go, for example, from our 10-year implementation schedule down to 6. That could give us up to 60% more efficiency. So there's much they could do on energy efficiency that is not happening. But here's the other kicker. Next bullet. And it might go longer than this one you'll see. For the past 10 years, that means 5 long-range plans every 2 years, Puget's projected increase in electricity demand never materialized. We have this chronic exaggeration of demand. And what does that teach us? Follow the money. And so we are in the middle of this right now. It's very problematic and it's systemic. So next slide, please. Okay, PSE and its gas utility. You might know we have our new law that requires the International Panel on Climate Change Standard, 95% reduction of fossil fuel by 2050. Next, 70% by 2040 and 45% by 2030. So what is Puget doing on their 20-year plan? Next bullet. PSE's gas forecast the next 20 years, virtually zero change from now over the next 20 years. And our state law calls for 70% reduction over that same period of time. We have largely been paying attention to their electricity plan, and we just can't ignore their long-range gas plan anymore. And that is changing, and it's changing now. And we need to flag that for you because they are way off the mark. All right, let's keep going. Next slide. All right, this is a doozy. This is really fun. It was so atrocious. They attempted to sell their part of the Colstrip plant in Montana to Northwestern. And this is under our new 100% clean electricity law. We're supposed to get rid of coal by 2025. So they were doing an end run around the law to sell their share of the plant, would have prolonged that life out to 2042, because that's how long Northwestern wants to run it. So here's some thing as how this all went down. Next bullet. There are 6 owners in Colstrip, and when they proposed this sale, they never told the co-owners. When they tried to do a buyback contract of that same power, they were going to stick us with a higher price for that same power that they were then selling. Final bullet. Another real kicker about this deal, they were going to sell the plant, and that plant was going to continue to produce underground, groundwater contamination, toxics from the plant, and we were still going to have to pay for it, even though somebody else was producing the pollution. This was such a bad deal, they had to withdraw. Last bullet on this. When they first queued up this deal, they said we were going to be saving tens of millions of dollars, and by the time it was over, they had to withdraw this proposal because the opposition was so clear. Never take their sales pitch at face value. Next slide. Now, some of you might have heard of PSC's new gas pledge. It came out earlier, I think it was earlier this week, where they're saying they're going to be net zero by 2045, 30% emission reductions by 2030. So here's how they're gaming the system on this pledge. Next bullet. Use of offsets. So if they're going to do emissions reductions, if they're instead going to do offsets, that's really almost like buying indulgences, right? They can simply get really cheap offsets, but really not make any meaningful reductions. Then the other piece they're doing is that you'll learn about this a little bit more, and many of you know about it. They are way overselling what we can do with renewable natural gas. The state has said the best we could do is an increase of 3 to 5% with renewable natural gas compared to how much we gas use now. That is not a long-term solution, but it is being used as a reason to justify new gas infrastructure. And then in this pledge, they also used a lot of hedge words, like they said that they were going to get rid of subsidies for new gas lines, but they said modify the tariff. Well, if they really are committed to getting rid of the subsidies, they would say eliminate. Here's one of my favorites. In the pledge, they say, we're going to get rid of coal by 2025. Well, you know what? That's the law. I mean, they could have said, we promise not to break the law. Okay, so what's the lesson here? You got to match what their pledge says with their plans. And right now we have a massive disconnect. Okay, next slide. Yeah, we wanted to go a little deeper into renewable natural gas. Earlier when Ingrid was talking about the Partnership for Energy Progress, if you look at their video on their website, they talk a lot about renewable natural gas. And like I said, there's very, very limited amount that we can actually get from that, 3 to 5% with a lot of economic subsidies in order to make that happen. And what we, as you can read through these bullet points here, capturing gas and using it for energy is better than letting it escape, but it would be even better if you reduce the amount of methane from generating it in the first place. You still have the methane leaks when you transport it. And as like I said, there's only a small percent that can replace it. And then it really is providing one of the primary excuses they are using to try to justify new gas plants on the promise that it will be replaced by renewable natural gas. It's just not there. Okay. Next slide. All right, I thought it'd be useful. It's really hard to see. And if you start at the top left, that's where it gets fracked, right? They pull this upstream methane out of the ground. It goes through immediately, it pretty quickly gets processed. They take out water and other contaminants. And then it literally goes through thousands of miles of heavy duty transmission pipelines, either from the Rockies primarily or Canada. When it comes here in Washington, I don't know if you can see it, bottom right, underground storage, that's usually Jackson Prairie in Southwest Washington. Gets stored there, more leakage, comes back out into the transmission, and then finally you get to your end use, power plants, methanol, LNG in Tacoma, industrial, business, and residential. And by the way, the methanol and the LNG is not the end of the story, because those in turn have further end use and more leakage. And here's the kicker. When you add all this up from wellhead to end use, if you have just about 3% leakage rate, and if you're using the higher value global warming potential, then what happens is you are nearly doubling the emissions impact from gas. So the gas industry likes to measure it from the smokestack, but that literally could be just half the story. So really, this upstream methane emissions is really important. The state right now is in the middle of a rulemaking for greenhouse gas accountability, and we'll talk about how you can get engaged in that later. Next slide. I want to talk about some of these distortions here that they've used in Tacoma LNG, they've used in their assessment of gas power plants, they've used in their gas utility. And it's this first one is the 100-year versus 20-year global warming potential. The standard is 100-year. We are pushing for them to use a 20-year because that is where really methane, essentially most of it converts to CO2 after 20 years. And if you're really going to capture what the problem is for methane, it might be better to be using a 20-year frame. Under the current state rule, they have to consider both, but Puget is categorically avoiding that because it makes methane look much worse. They did this nasty little trick of using old data from 2007, even though there was an earlier report, a more recent report out of 2014. They finally got caught on that. They couldn't use old data because it was preferential for them. They've also done cherry picking. They've been trying to pretend that all their fuel comes from British Columbia. And even the assessment of the cleanliness of that fuel in British Columbia was wrong. But it really gets to a more important point of how we do this assessment. And the last bullet I want to talk about. This is important for the greenhouse gas rule going on right now. If you're buying gas from British Columbia, you're just pushing buyers off to another place. And this in the climate accountability is called leakage. You can't make sure if you're doing a greenhouse gas reduction project that it isn't having unintended consequences. If you're buying gas from British Columbia, you're pushing buyers off to the Rockies. The only accurate way to account for climate leakage is to do an assessment of the entire fuel supply and attribute that to each developer of gas. That's a really important outcome in this upcoming rule. And it really says we have to match the intensity and rigor in which we look at these rules. And that's happening now, and we need you all to be part of that. Okay, next slide. Yeah, so many people on this. So many people in this webinar knows this one. This is how long have we been banging our head against this wall? Too long. Okay, we personally, Sierra Club, have been asking for their data for 10 years, and we have been categorically denied, and it is super frustrating. And so I want to tell you a couple of manipulations that happen. Next bullet. There's two things that happens when they do their modeling. One is you don't know the data values. If they're not giving you the values, you don't know. And just one small example, we pushed for them to give a data value on Montana wind, some of the best wind in the world, in the country. They, in their winter, they were only saying, okay, well, we can only say that for 5% of that total power is going to be useful in winter. We said, no, all the data says it's 40%. That's just one value. It took us almost 2 years to get one value change from 5% to 40%. There are so many values that go into these models. Here's another way they manipulate it. If you can't have complete transparency, this is what you call weighted averages. So what they do is they're going to run about a gas forecast, and they'll use all these different implications of gas. And what they're going to do is they're going to come back and say they tested all of the average gas price, and guess what? Gas is low. But when you find out what really happens, they ran 5 scenarios, but 4 of them were of the lowest price of gas and only 1 was high. So of course the average they come out is with low gas price, meaning let's buy gas. That's putting your thumb on the scale. And unless and until they show us the data, we can't know that. And how they run the model, we can't know that. This last bullet here, I want to give you an example. We have now agreements from utilities across the country to show us their data, including with PSE's past owner in Louisiana. We have an agreement where they disclose all the data. Why doesn't Puget do that? What are they hiding? It just cannot be justified, and they are still withholding data. All right, last bullet. If you, Ingrid, or is it no, Leslie, thank you. Yes, I really want to underscore this, right? If you don't like what you're hearing, you make them show you the data, and if they don't, we simply cannot believe what's being said. And this is what's happening time and again with the forecasting, and we are still not getting the data we need. It is not transparent, it is not open, and we must demand that we get this data. It's happening in other states, it should be happening here. All right. I think there you go. That's my piece. And there's so much more. And you know what? There's so many folks on this meeting with us who could tell their own horror stories as well. It doesn't end here, but that was a snapshot. So back to you, Ingrid.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Doug and Claudia, for all of your insight. It's so, so helpful to hear. And really frightening, in my opinion, to hear all the ways that they're intervening. So now, of course, what do we do when we find out what's wrong? We take action against it. So here are just a few ways that all of us can be taking steps and taking action to counter this misinformation and deception coming from Puget Sound Energy. So the first is what Doug just alluded to. So right now, PSC is working on their IRP. It's a 20-year plan comment period that we have where folks in the public can give comment and participate in hearings and send in comment. So Sierra Club is working on this, and we'll be able to send you all a link to take action on that in just a little bit of time. They're working on this. So stay plugged into that process, because that's a really good opportunity to use your voice and demand that they be honest and transparent in their processes. The second is an action that we actually just started today, which is calling on PSC to ditch PEP, the Partnership for Energy Progress, to leave this fossil fuel front group and stop pouring money into running propaganda across our state. It is not okay, and we should not accept that this company, who has so much influence on our lives, is spending money on really dangerous and harmful climate misinformation. So I think the links are going in the chat. You can go ahead and if you follow that link, it will allow you to send emails to the top folks at PSC. And we're really hoping that we can just flood their inboxes and get their attention and call on them to leave this front group or AstroTurf group. The next is to participate in Washington's new rules for fossil fuels. So this is another process that's happening at the state level right now through the Department of Ecology. So this is a campaign that will be going over the course of the next few months. And we really hope that you can get plugged into it, because this will be a really, really good opportunity for us to make sure that the scales are balanced and that they're not putting their finger on the scale, like Doug was just mentioning, and that there are fair rules in place for fossil fuels in Washington. And then just in general, moving forward, we should all be empowered to speak out whenever we see this type of misinformation come to us. So whether you see a bus ad like I saw, or if you're on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram and you see a tweet or a post from a company or from Partnership for Energy Progress, or you see an ad, to call it out and to highlight the things that are wrong about it. As we've all experienced, especially over the Trump years, misinformation is extremely dangerous. And we all, I think, have an obligation to say something when we see something that is wrong. And that could be potentially really hurting public opinion and putting us farther back from achieving climate justice together. So just in general, call it out and say the things that you know, because you all now definitely know some things about natural gas, so-called renewable natural gas, and we can all speak out against it. So now we're going to watch a video from the Partnership for Energy Progress, which Doug also mentioned. So this is the video that they put together. I'll just say it is not a good video. It is all like stock images and video, and it's truly just full of lies. So I would love for us to just watch it together. Think about, as you're watching it, the things that you know are wrong, or like what they're trying to evoke with the images and what they're saying. And then after we watch the video, Leslie is going to put us into breakout groups so that we have some time to go through and talk with each other about what we noticed. So think about the things that stand out to you and the emotions that they're trying to evoke, or the message that they're really trying to have sink in. So we'll watch that now, and then we'll go into breakout groups.
In our vast and bountiful Northwest, alive with beauty, thriving on innovation, you'll find a collective spirit energized by progress and dedicated to you. Here, you'll find a new kind of partnership, a collaboration of utilities, farmers, workers, and businesses across Oregon and Washington, all working together to support the reliable and affordable natural gas foundation our region's clean energy future can depend on.
To say that I love cooking for you is an understatement. Natural gas allows me to bring incredible meals to a lot of people. It's reliable, affordable, safe, and for me, there's never been a better way to cook than natural gas.
We're the Partnership for Energy Progress, providers and consumers of safe, reliable, and affordable natural gas. And we've come together as we move toward adding more renewables.
It's exciting to be a part of the renewable natural gas movement. Innovation that's already here and happening. It's changing how we do business, and it's providing for our family's future.
Our partnership is here for you, leveraging our relationships with foresters, farmers, and local governments throughout the Northwest to deliver more renewable natural gas to your homes and businesses. Renewable natural gas is our energy future that is happening right now through capturing methane from organic materials like wood, food, and other waste. We convert emissions into renewable natural gas, a clean energy source.
We're putting renewable natural gas into our existing natural gas system.
Natural gas has driven our region's success in reducing emissions and provides the reliable energy source necessary to expand wind, solar, and tomorrow's new solutions.
We love the comfort and warmth of natural gas in our home.
The future of clean energy is here for you. Learn how at pepnw.org.
All righty. It's always a treat to watch it. Okay, Leslie, are we good to go with breakout groups?
Yeah, did you want to, well, I guess I can say it. So we'll have the rooms open for about 6 minutes. And then you'll see a little timer that tells you we have 30 seconds at the end of those 6 minutes for you guys to return back here. So I'm about to open up the rooms right now.
Thank you, Leslie. But I would love to just hear if folks can just use the chat and put in, what stood out to you about the video and what did your group focus on? What were the things that really popped out as the message that they're trying to get across, or what they're appealing to, or the emotions that they're getting at, what they want you to think about Partnership for Energy Progress and renewable natural gas. I would love for folks to just kind of chime into the chat. And then after we see some responses, then we'll move on to taking some questions.
I have a question.
Yes, is it okay if we wait until we get to, we'll get to questions in a few minutes. Is that all right? Thank you. All right, let's see.
We thought that they made it sound as if all energy all the gas energy they supplied was renewable.
Mm-hmm.
They kept using that phrase, renewable natural gas, and what you know from your own knowledge is that it's only gas from cows and from landfills, which is not a very high percentage of their gas. So I thought that was disinformation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. I see somebody says emphasis on families at home and small businesses. Yes, absolutely. And I could come up with a couple of reasons why they would focus on that. Someone says everything is going well, no need to be concerned. Yep. And then following that, lots of shiny, happy people. Yep.
Investment is one of the big things they said, and we noticed this a lot during the campaigns down here in California when we had this candidate running. They said, well, oil and gas, they invest in this in home, they invest this in the community, we give money to charity, that we get this a lot down here in California, that they think they're all good because without oil and gas money, you wouldn't have all these great projects and programs going forth. And that's one of the big things that was part of the campaign down here that we had to face.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. I see folks they're appealing to the emotions, that they're not showing any pollution. Lots of people of color are in the video. which I think is also very intentional. Yep. Yeah, thank you all so much. I hope that watching the video and talking with a group was a helpful practice in being able to identify, you know, the key messages that they're getting across and the ways that they try to deceive folks. And now I would love for us to move on to questions. So I'm wondering if we had any in the chat already. And if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat so that we can read them off and direct them to the right person.
I think we answered in the chat the questions for the most part from earlier.
Oh, good. Okay.
I didn't notice any for flagging that to dive into that we didn't type a response to. And if we missed any, sorry, please just pop it in there again.
Mm-hmm.
I see Les's hand is raised there, and then Poco.
Did I do that?
Go ahead, Les.
Okay, I was waiting to be called on. I didn't want to be disrespectful. I just, you know, they place the diversity on the promotion of it, but when we go to these actions and these information sharings and these public commentary periods, you do not see any of that diversity in the ownership of the corporations, the salesmanship of the fossil fuels industry, and what fossil fuels industry funds. So it's like, it's very frustrating for me as a Black man to watch this and always be attending these informational sessions, and then not have that be a main focus of the conversation that's going on and people sharing what they can do with the term whiteness, the construct of whiteness, and how it is represented in all of this. And I would like to hear from folks out here, you know, how are they using that and what do they see? You know, how does that make them feel? You know, it's I question it all the time.
Thank you so much, Lester. And I would love to encourage folks to really internalize that and maybe respond in the chat with what comes to mind and how we can, for folks who are white, how we can be using our whiteness and that privilege and weaponize it to take on the fossil fuel industry, who we know has always targeted and abused communities of color, including Black communities and Indigenous folks. So please, thank you, Lester, for bringing that up. I really appreciate that. Poco, did you want to ask your question?
Yes, well, there was only me and another person in the breakout room, and we got sidetracked, and we both had a question, which is, so years ago, I signed a thing with the Puget Sound Energy at a fair saying I would spend a little more money to help for clean air. And I'm thinking now that I shouldn't have did that, and I should get my $2 or $3 a month back. And I'm wondering how many other people, you know, might think they were doing something good, because I just saw them use clean air stuff in their promotion for gas. So now I'm wondering, that little box and that little extra money that I'm giving them, that could add up with a lot of people that thought they were doing something for the environment. So should I not be giving them money to help them? Is it all a hoax?
Doug, do you know much about the like the exact technical side of where those green energy credits of theirs go? It seemed like from the part that I've learned about it that it's a little bit of a trick, in that they can then say that they're making more clean energy, but really it's customers paying for it. So they're kind of claiming your money into them doing a good thing, is kind of the way that I interpreted it. Correct.
Doug can probably explain
Doug
the
or
REC
John
program.
Marsh knows.
I think there's others here who can jump in on this one too. If you're talking about the Green Power Program, that money does go into often smaller projects that are happening. They're also required to be offering that program. You know, it's I don't want to discount it. I would encourage any kind of experimenting that Puget can do with those dollars and do some programs on green power. There is just I guess the problem for me with that program is that it's you don't want to have I don't want to have people think that if you're buying green power, that's the end of the story. There is so much more to be done, and if people can think that, well, I'm buying green power so I'm cool, please don't let it stop there. It's good and it's very, very marginal, and so put it in that context, but don't ever let that take away from you being actively engaged in changing the system.
I would just second that. So I had that box checked for at least the last 10 years, probably longer. And the only thing I can say about it is just the proof is in the pudding. So I looked at, what is the percentage of fossil fuels that have been in our mix over the past 10 years. And if that program is actually doing something, you would see at least some decline in fossil fuels. And actually, during that time, the percentage of fossil fuels in PSE's mix has gone up. So I do feel like, I'm sure it does some good in some ways, but overall, this utility has a big problem, and that's not the answer.
I think Linda was up next with a question, and then I think Kevin Jones's hand raised after that.
My question is, where are we in the fight? Where are we along the timeline or along the issues line of our fight with this company? Are we at the beginning, in the first quarter of it? Have we won some big battles? How big are we compared to them? What likelihood do we have of having future wins? I don't have a picture of where we are in the fight. Can you just give us a little bit of a picture on that?
I'd like to take a shot at that. Linda, I'm going to turn this around. It means because people like you get involved, right? And we've had some successes, and the only reasons we've had successes because we can bring people power to bear over the money that Puget can try to spend to drown out our voices. And so your engagement is key to us making a difference, and all of us matters. And we have been able to win, but only when we bring significant people power to bear. And I hope you're part of that.
Absolutely. But I like to not fight with something over my eyes. I like to know where I am in the fight, and I don't have any kind of a picture about that right now.
Well, I'll put a finer point on that. Puget has 237 megawatts of new gas power proposed in their 20-year plan, and that is expected to happen around 2026. And now the new 100% clean electricity law says we have to move away from fossil fuel. And at this point, we just cannot afford to be building new gas. We have to be moving away. So one of the most immediate answers to your question is, if you can join us in our fight to prevent Puget from building new gas, we will win.
I'm in. How many more people do we need? 500?
At least.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
I'll jump in actually too, just on that last point, and say that it's Puget Sound Energy being so big is one of those things where we're just going to have to kind of chip away at them in multiple places at the same time. And so doing these comment periods that we listed in the take actions, also, like as far as the Tacoma LNG project, we have 2 more months until that court hearing, and public opinion does matter. The more that people talk about how wrong it is, how the tribe has been treated, the Puyallup tribe, and how it shouldn't be allowed to use that old 2007 data, the better our chances are in court. So even though it's something not tangible, speaking out about the Tacoma LNG over the next 2 months could help tip another court win to join the Kalama wins and Jordan Cove, and kind of just knock down that next domino. And another kind of piece that we're going to talk about in some of our next bits in the series is going to be about the differences between a PUD, a public utility, and Puget Sound Energy, where it's all about making money. And the next event in the series is going to dig into that really well. So we won't dig into it too far right now, other than to say I'm with Marilyn in saying, yeah, wherever we can, let's just get them out of the picture.
Great, thank you. That's great.
I think Kevin was next. And there's also, and then there was a question in the chat a little bit ago from Eric, and then I see Megan's hand.
Right. Hey, thanks, Stacy. I can say that I spent almost a 4 or 6 month period of time calling Puget Sound Energy to ask them how their customers could help them move away from coal plants. And I really expected them to say, sign up for the Green Power Program because we'll get more revenue to build more windmills and more solar. I never heard them say that. However, I have heard from Rob Harmon, and I suspect many folks here know Rob. He said he for it. I would, however, look at Jim Lazar's comment. I trust Jim implicitly. Oops, looks like I dropped out for a little bit. Looks like I'm back. Yeah, I would. So Rob Harmon, if you know him, he does vouch for the program. Jim Lazar have posted a comment. I would absolutely take a look at Jim. And I would say there's other providers who do that similar service. And they basically, my understanding is they map your energy use and then they put renewable energy onto the grid that basically reflects your usage. But I just wanted to mention that at least I've heard one well-placed source say that he would recommend that as at least a small step in the right direction.
And the question from earlier that was in the chat from Eric was about if you could explain the difference between net zero and fossil free. I think net zero is another one of their buzzwords that get thrown around to kind of make it sound like they're going to be fossil free, but the reality is something different, and a lot of people haven't heard kind of what that difference is.
Net zero implies the ability to use offsets. So I'll give you a very clear present day example. Under our 100% clean electricity law, all utilities in Washington state must be 80% carbon free by 2030, and they must be 100% net zero by 2030. So the remaining 20% of their fossil fuel, if it's not replaced with renewables and clean energy within electricity, they can buy offsets. And what offsets mean are you are buying greenhouse gas reductions in other places. The problem with that, there are some incredibly cheap ways to buy reductions. You can get a renewable energy credit maybe for $2 a ton, whereas the carbon price that we put on NCETA to be put in your planning and your acquisition is $74 a ton. So basically, Puget, to get to net zero, they can buy these really cheap offsets. It's really like buying an indulgence. It doesn't do anything to get the core of your business to transform the core of your business. And that is one of the fundamental flaws with offsets and the concept of net zero.
Thank you, Doug. I think Megan was next, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Yes, one question I had was just a technical one. Because I use an iPad, I can't really see the chat easily. And I wonder if you guys are going to send out the chat or the information from the chat. That would be very helpful. And then the other thing I wanted to ask or comment about was in relation to what Lester said about diversity. Isn't the Green Energy Program one of the places where we could put pressure to bear on them spending that money in people of color communities? You know, who don't have the money to like install solar and things like that. I know that doesn't get to the core of the LNG plant, which just needs to not happen, be stopped. But anyway, That was what I was thinking of in relation to Lester's comment.
Thanks, Megan. Yeah, again, it might take a little more digging into on what the parameters of how that program is set up. If there's room to kind of do a little bit of pressure on, hey, where exactly are those funds going? So that would be an interesting. If anybody on the call is interested in digging into that and wanted to share out afterwards, I'm going to pop my email in the chat. So if we have any kind of research folks on the call that want to do a little task, feel free to hit me up on email and we can see if we can get an answer to that. And I think Charlotte had her hand raised next, and then we can go back to Les.
Hi, I'm a veteran of many of these fossil fuel plants because I was in an Audubon Society chapter in Longview, Kelso. And so within 15 miles of my house, there were 5 different fossil fuel projects proposed over a 12-year, 14-year period. And I would like to say that it seems to me from my experience that a lot of people power in terms of showing up to hearings and writing comments and all that is really necessary. It's at the beginning stages and even the middle stages of this. But at some point it goes to the courts. And at that point, you just cross your fingers and hope that, you know, it goes your way. And so far we've been really lucky. The ones I've been involved with have all been defeated. Sometimes they're defeated by market forces changing, but one way or the other, it seems to me that part of this is sometimes a waiting game and sometimes it's the courts, but still it's a very long drawn out process. And that I don't want to discourage anybody because, you know, we just had two victories in the last month. So, but they started in 2008 and 2014. Long time coming, these victories.
Yeah, good point.
Thank you, Charlotte. Also, Megan, to your question before about the chat, we will be saving it and we will send it out. So thank you for asking that. I appreciate that. Lester? And then this will be our final comment or question of the night before we say goodnight.
Well, there was a comment earlier about getting people in mass to show up and get into this fight, and that could be what's necessary. Yet there's that disconnect that I talked about earlier with, you know, communicating. So with the person that was providing, Doug, I think it is, all the data and information, very statistical and scientific and things like that. How do you translate that information so that the working class folks who can't spend their time doing all this data research can understand what is actually going on and get them to the table, get them to show up at an action, get them to ask questions? You know, it's like, it's so noticeable, the lack of that involvement of the people who are most affected by all of these situations. So I beg of you that are doing this work to work on your delivery and emphasize on inducing the rest of us into this fight, or into, you know, recognizing that, you know, this is to the detriment of our humanity, you know. So like, do all the, it's great, you guys get along great doing it, but like, there's a lot of us out here that are struggling with this.
Thank you, Lester. I'll really take that to heart, and we work on that a lot. I know it was highly technical. I think there are some really boiling it down to the nugget of the talking points that we can provide, like, you know, Puget is supposed to reduce 70% of their carbon in their gas, and they've done 0, right? So we can give some pretty simple and clear touchstones, but then people need to add, when they're testifying before the Utilities Commission, why do you, Lester, care? You don't need to know, and the greater public doesn't need to know all the deep facts. They need to know the big important ones, and then they need to bring their personal story to our decision makers, and that's what we're going to try to empower to do. But I take your point, and we think about that a lot. Nice cat.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you all so much for being here and for being part of this and for asking so many questions and participating. I really hope that this is not, the end of us learning and working together. I really hope that this is the beginning, not the beginning, but the continuation of folks in Washington and communities in Washington, calling on PSE to be accountable to us, to the people, and to our health and our future. I'm really excited for the rest of the series, and I hope that you all are too. So the next one again is next Thursday at the same time, 6 p.m. And you should absolutely register if you want to attend. That one is specifically about financial flaws. So go ahead and use that link to register. And Stacy will be following up with all the information. So the recording of tonight, the chat from tonight, and a bunch of resources and all of the ways that you can take action that we named out. So all of that information will show up in your inbox in the next few days. But I'm so grateful for all of you for being here in the space that we created together. And I really hope that y'all are able to take care of yourselves and have a wonderful night. Thank you so much for your time.